became part of an underground group in the early 70s called the Black Liberation Army. And she was accused of killing a New Jersey state police trooper. And basically she escaped from prison in the late 70s and has been in Cuba ever since. There was some controversy in the 90s when Christine Todd Whitman, sort of the then governor of New Jersey, was basically putting out a bounty on her and saying she wants to come. We needed to get her back from Cuba and sort of try her for things. But basically, when we think about Assad is part of a group of both black and white radicals of the period, or revolutionaries, who felt that they were going to deploy violence somehow strategically enough to foment a revolution. And that's a very tough period to look at historically, because in certain instances, innocent people were killed, including police officers. In certain instances, revolutionaries were killed who were innocent. So it's a very, so I wouldn't put them, in terms of Black Power, certainly in a macro way, they're part of it. There's just such a small group of people who did that. And I think sometimes what people do is disproportionately focus on it. The white version of this is the Weather Underground. The Weather, they blew up a brownstone in Greenwich Village on March 7, 1970, and they had a bound-making factory. Now, the Weathermen really don't represent the new left in terms of unblacks. It means it's a small offshoot of activists who are willing to use violence. And you have that among the black movement too, basically.
And I'd like to come on that, because that is one of the issues related to the definition of Black Power, because that kind of narrow part of the movement's origins has somewhat overtaken this concept of Black Power. So the term evoked fear nationally as meaning, black men in arms going to, shoot up everyone and so on and so forth, when in fact that was only one dimension, and a dimension that larger parts in fact rejected.
Yes, sir.
If I can also add about that, I mean, that was also something we see with the origins of the Black Party, which basically started in California. The reality of the matter is that the Black Party started as an organization, a peaceful organization, basically to protect African American citizens from police brutality. However, under Hoover, it was painted as one of the strongest terrorist acts in organizations in the United States, and we know basically they were inside plants with that. But there were earlier movements, of course, in 1831 with Nat Turner. I can't think of the individual. He was also a Caucasian. I think in 1859, 1860, John Brown. Raid at Harper's Ferry, too, was an incident in which we have individuals that have taken up arms in defense of their citizenry. So these issues are not always terrorist. Sometimes it's about self-preservation and about protection of community.
Yeah, but what do you say to people who say that the Obama you may want to see this as a big and
Well, I say one of the things I argue with Obama is that he's a kind of rich figure in terms of like a figure who synthesizes aspects of what has come before, and at the same time points to new directions. So I think when you look at just the empirical level, after the 65 Civil Rights Act, the first wave of black politicians got into office using two strategies. One strategy was the black nationalist strategy, and that's the strategy of basically mayors like Coleman Young in Detroit, Kenneth Gibson in Newark, Maynard Jackson in Atlanta. And that strategy was predicated on aspects of racial solidarity, that these cities had become blacker and browner, and you needed both blacks and Latinos. Because remember, in Newark, Kenneth Gibson couldn't have won without 10% of the Latino vote. He got a good round of the vote. And you utilized racial solidarity to do things like, once you got in office, make sure that black entrepreneurs got access to affirmative action to the taxpayers' base. And this is also even though he's now a joke. Marion Barry was a really hardcore activist in the 70s. He's best remembered, like Spencer's going to be best remembered for this prostitution scandal. Barry's best remembered for being caught on tape smoking crack. And it's almost insane to say, to convince people that, you know, there was another Marion Barry who, besides these problems in the 60s and 70s, he's one of the most courageous Americans. Yeah? Marion Barry was somebody who in 1961 would walk into crowds of whites in Mississippi who were beating him in the head, just like how John Lewis got beat, cracking his skull, right? And Barry wouldn't flinch. He wouldn't fight back either. So he's a guy who's been hospitalized and all this stuff, but then 20 years later we remember him in this negative way. But that's one strategy. The other strategy was an integrationist, interracial strategy. And that was a strategy of Edward Brooke in Massachusetts, black senator in '66. That was a strategy of Tom Bradley in Los Angeles. And Bradley became mayor of Los Angeles in '73, predominantly white Los Angeles. Did not become governor of predominantly white California. It seems like Los Angeles whites were more willing to vote for him than whites in the larger state. And Dave Dinkins in New York had a coalition. Harold Washington had a multiracial coalition in Chicago. And I think what Obama has managed to do is really synthesize aspects of both of them, where he's this multiracial, he's built a multiracial coalition that that builds upon the civil rights strategy, but also amplifies it. Because at the national level, it's always been very tough to have any black political figures. I think we have 3 black governors, and right now there's 1 black senator, right? And the reason that is because nationally, it's tougher to forge a coalition of white voters who are willing to vote for you. And he's managed to do that. He actually had to break with the civil rights rank to do that, because civil rights activists were more used to playing what people call brokerage politics, and political scientists are right here with me. Brokerage politics, where basically, you know, you serve as an in-between between white politicians and the black community. So Obama, it's very interesting that there's something very audacious about saying you're going to be president even though, you know, you're black. Well, Gerald Ferrara says we're all lucky to have this, so I'm waiting for my hands to because I didn't. I always felt great, but now I see that we're actually in a better position by being black. So I'm expecting the endowed chair at Harvard. The extra stuff. I didn't know. Thank you for pulling me in. I think it's even better being black.
I think your question is very, if I could speak back on this one question from Dr. Peniel. What is very interesting about Barack Obama is the fact that he is, first of all, the first significant African-American political figure since Reconstruction. You mentioned the fact that we now have 3 African-American governors, first in Doug Wilder in Virginia, the second recently in Massachusetts, and now, of course, with the situation in New York, we have Patterson who's emerging. But the thing that's interesting about Barack Obama is that he does not fulfill, I think, the stereotypical existential perspective and image of African Americans. First of all, he has an undergraduate from Columbia and not from Morehouse. He has his JD, of course, from Harvard. He's very interactive with the Harvard Law Review. He's been very active in organizing in politics. His mother is Caucasian and his father is African. So, and then there was this big download of discussion before his candidacy was legitimatized in the primaries of the question among African